Hey, before we dive into this week's episode, if you've been enjoying the show, I'd love your support. Take just 10 seconds to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback helps others discover the wisdom and inspiration that I share on the Pivot to Balance podcast. Let's build a community of balance seekers together. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to share the love. Now let's dive into the episode. Hello and welcome to the Pivot to Balance podcast. I'm your host, AK, and I hope you're doing well. In a world that pulls us in a million different directions and with a billion distractions, finding balance can feel like an ambiguous quest. Join me on this podcast as I try to navigate life's twists and turns with mindfulness, purpose, and grace. In each episode, we will dive into topics like self-care, personal growth, mindset shifts by sharing practical insights, stories, and maybe even interviews. Get ready to pivot, to recalibrate, and find your balance. Follow the Pivot to Balance podcast, and I will see you on the other side. Welcome back to this week's episode. In this week's episode, we're going to talk about something that's not discussed that often, but one that I think about every single day, which is living life with no regrets. I know, it sounds heavy. This can even be a little morbid, but hear me out. This conversation is not about fearing death. It's about completely embracing life. So my number one goal, let me just put it out there. My number one goal in life is to face death without any regrets. I'm only 25 years old, and yet I think about who I'm becoming almost every second of the day. I'm very intentional about how I show up in any part of my life, almost always very intentional, be it relationship, professional, personal, anything. I observe people a lot, and one thing I've learned is everyone regrets something. And which made me think about, what do I regret? And I figured out I don't regret anything in life. And it's not because I'm perfect or that I've made all the right choices. It's because I 100% believe that I wouldn't be who I am today without the decisions that I've made. Every choice, every mistake, every risk, it's all shaped me into the person that I am today. And growing up in an Indian household, you don't just casually talk about death. It's almost taboo. And honestly, I think it's the same in many cultures around the world. But over the years, I've read like thousands of articles, listened to so many quote unquote death positive podcast episodes, and come to a realization that dying is not a matter of if, it's a matter of when and how. Shout out to Andrew Petty for coining that phrase, I guess. I read that in his website once. I couldn't have said it better myself. But the truth is, we live life thinking we have time, but the reality is we're all living on borrowed time. Hey, if you listen to this podcast, I think you will also love my newsletter, Elevate Gazette. I talk a lot about elevating your professional and your personal lives. Make sure to subscribe to my newsletter. Go to anushakanan.com/email list, and I'm sure you will love it. Join everyone who is like-minded. And now let's get into the episode. So, like I said, I observe people a lot, and I've learned quite a few things, different perspectives on life I've got, and I've observed friends who are all over the spectrum when it comes to how they view life. For example, some of them want to hustle hard and make it big. And that making it big can mean whatever it means to them. It's very subjective. There are other friends who feel stuck. They don't like their job. They hate the city they live in. The people around them, they don't like them. So they kind of retreat into a shell. Some days I love everything I do. And there are days I ask myself, do you still think you like doing these things that you do? So coming back to the regret I was talking about, something that always sticks with me is the number one regret of dying people is wishing they had the courage to live a life true to themselves. That's a heavy thing to realize, right? I'll repeat it. The number one regret of dying people is wishing they had the courage to live a life true to themselves. And it makes me wonder, why do some people hate working so much? Some people struggle to show or even feel their emotions. And for a lot of us, I think it stems from childhood. the environment we grew up in, the beliefs instilled in us, it all shapes how we view work, relationship, and life itself. And this episode is happening because I read this one thing and it completely just stuck with me. That's the entire reason I'm doing this episode. And I'm going to call it the obituary exercise. I once read about a guy who carried a handwritten obituary in his wallet. It was not someone else's obituary. It was his obituary, and he was very young when he wrote this. The obituary described the kind of person he wanted to be remembered as. And every time he read it, it reminded him to make decisions that aligned with that vision. He lived every day to become that person, which got me thinking with the whole dying people's regret and this guy's obituary. I think we spend way too much time worrying about what others will think, what others will say or do, that we forget to focus on ourselves. But the thing here is, it's not about how others will remember you. It's about how you will feel about yourself. So, I don't know, I thought this was a fascinating observation to kind of think about. Well, we have different kinds of people in our lives. Everybody has a very different perspective on what life should look like for them. We don't always see eye to eye with everybody on everything. But yes, our childhood has a certain influence, why we view the life the way we view it. And the number one regret of dying people is not living life to their fullest. So, like I said, dying isn't a matter of if, it's a matter of when and how. So what do we want to be, or what do we want to feel like when we're old and gray? And are we being that person now? Are we taking any steps toward being that person? Because we often think, oh, I have time, I'm only in my 20s. But before you know it, you'll be in your 30s. I feel like I turned 18 20 days ago, and I'm more closer to 28 than I am to 18. So let me ask you this. What kind of person do you want to be? Not what others expect of you, not what society says you should be, but for you, for yourself. Write it down. And I think that's how you start building your goals. Yeah, I know this isn't an easy topic, and it might even feel a little too heavy for some. But the thing here is, the one thing I want you to take away from this is life is not infinite. So let's live it in a way that actually makes us proud, not for anyone else, but for ourselves. And yeah, this is just what I wanted to convey today. Thank you so much for listening. I hope this episode resonated with you. If you did, I would love, love, love to hear your thoughts. Share it, comment. You can comment on Spotify or DM me on Instagram. I would love to hear your thoughts on them. And now go grab a cup of lemon water, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.